Welcome to Walking with Spirit with Dr. Ruth Anderson on the International Angels Network. Today is Thursday, June 7, 2018. I'm your host, Ruth Anderson, and I'm coming to you from Colorado. Tonight's show has been pre-recorded, so we will not be taking any callers. I am an author and a spiritual counselor providing individualized transformational experiences for my clients using Holy Fire Reiki, energy work, and connection with the spiritual divinity, including Divine Mother, Archangels Michael, Gabriel, and Raphael. Here at International Angels Network, we explore spirituality, angels, spirit guides, our loved ones on the other side, and much more. Our radio podcasts are available to you on Google Play, iTunes, Podbean, and now Stitcher. These are all easy sites to use and make it very easy to listen to our archive shows. Tonight we are starting our 5-week mini-series with guest Linda Dierks. Linda will be leading us in our learning about self-esteem, energy, and spirituality, and how together they can propel us into stepping into our authentic power. I know it will be both inspirational and motivating. This episode of International Angels Network is sponsored by Holistic Light Rejuvenation Center. For more information, holisticrejuvenate.com. Sunday Sturgeon is the founder and CEO of Holistic Light Rejuvenation Center, and she's one of our hosts. She's the sponsor of our Sunday and Thursday radio shows. We're pleased to announce that International Angels Network is now also sponsored by Audible by Amazon. If you go to www.audibletrial.com/International Angels Network, you can get a free audiobook. So please check that out today. I would like to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to listen in. This show is called Walking with Spirit. Walking with Spirit means consciously living in the physical realm with frequent connection to the divinity in the spirit realm and being open to all that they want me to experience. Every day I check in with my guides, Divine Mother, and God, sometimes seeking guidance, sometimes seeking connection, and sometimes seeking their healing abilities. Many days I receive lessons by hearing, seeing, or feeling signs coming in from the energetic realm. I never know what my day is going to look like or what the next learning might be. Each week I share a story about an experience I had while walking with Spirit. Here's a story that I experienced recently. I write articles for Facebook, a small hometown newspaper, my website, and I just completed my second book. The name of my platform is The Ministry. As the ministry, I tend to think if I am not writing or putting information out into the world, then my time is not well spent. In other words, if I am not doing, then I am not worthy. Sound familiar to anyone? About 2 months ago, I was shown through meditation that I needed to spend time assimilating that which I had recently learned and allow myself time to heal on a soul level. I understood that my ability to have a more significant impact in the world relied on my taking this time for me. I knew it wasn't just important, it was imperative. It felt awkward to sit idle, not knowing my future direction or focus. Even though I struggled, I learned how to be still, listen, grieve, and accept divine timing. Once I was able to stop resisting the fact that I didn't have clarity and learned to enjoy my not knowing, the focus and direction of my future were finally made clear to me. After a difficult time of what I thought was sitting idle, I felt my energy shift and I understood that this period of reflection and assimilation was over. The phrase, "in the flow," came to my mind. I was back in the flow of creation. Once again, I stepped back into the world as a writer and speaker, but this time with more confidence and more depth of understanding. In hindsight, I realized that as a spiritual being, when I am sharing with others, I am in the flow of outward creative energy. News to me, and equally valid and important, while I was seemingly idle, I was still in the flow of creative energy. But this time, the energy flowed inward. It was purposeful as it melted away layer after layer of existing beliefs and life patterns that no longer served me. Some of those constructs were well entrenched, and it was painful to acknowledge and to release them. While I didn't look like I was working, in reality, I was doing a great deal of hard work. For those of you who feel that you need to be outwardly doing in order to be worthy, there is equal value in taking time to do the inner work. May you be patient with yourself during times of needed respite and recouping. I would now like to tell you about Linda Dierks, our guest host for this 5-week mini-series, Step Into Your Power. Linda comes to us with a career in corporate America under her belt. She spent the bulk of her career as the director of a regional chamber of commerce, worked for a counseling program, and as the director of a small college. Her decade-long journey of discovery started as a cancer patient disabled by fear and depression. After studying several alternative health modalities and wellness philosophies, she found accelerated healing and joy in the integration of science and spirituality, and now helps others achieve empowered physical and mental wellness. Linda is a pioneer of self-wellness through the mechanics of energy, power of thought, and love. As a speaker and author, she illustrates and models the method behind her triumph over illness and depression. Linda's passion is teaching energy medicine workshops for people suffering from cancer and major illness, addressing stress and substance abuse, and enhancing intuition, creativity, and problem-solving skills. Linda's writing has been featured in the March edition of Guide for Spiritual Living, Science of Mind magazine. Her article titled Growing Through Adversity, Finding the Gift in Illness, Adversity and Spirituality is truly inspiring. This article and her blog, Creating Joy and Wellness, are both available on her website, spinstrawtogoldnow.com. So without further delay, it is my honor to welcome Linda Dierks. Linda, hello.
Hello, Ruth, and it's an honor to be here. Thank you so much. Before I launch in, I really was taken by what you were just reading, and I want to emphasize one of the things that I struggle with is the balance between the experiential and the intellectual, and how important it is for us to engage in the experiential piece. And I think what you said about allowing your soul to rest is really important. For me, it comes down to also being in a state of allowing and not over-striving. I can be guilty of over-striving, and I know that I need to be in a state of allowing for a lot of this great work to happen. Is that the same with you?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And throughout my career, I was always an overachiever, and it was hard for me to let that mantle go, I'll tell you. So I, too, am trying to learn balance.
Okay, I'll remind you in the future, allowing, not striving.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to jump in what you call that flow of outward creative energy. I'm going to read first from my blog. When I started this series, Step Into Your Power, it's part 1. It's called Just Know Yourself. I knew that I had stepped into my power, reclaimed my confidence, when I no longer felt less than anyone, regardless of their success, profession, or financial status. Knowing I was onto something, I scratched my head and got serious about finding out where it came from. What did I do right? Self-esteem starts with defining who you are, that sense of self, that radiant pillar of light, flavor, color, and beingness that is uniquely you. Ask yourself, when I let go of fitting in, what is it about me that rises to the top? What rings sterling and true about my abilities and qualities? What gifts are distinctly mine, and how confident am I putting them out in the world? When that force of intuition and desire tugs my sleeve, where is it pointing me? Be genuine. You'll be more highly respected than if you were running with the crowd. No one is wiser, more experienced, or smarter than you. If someone thinks they are, they're only exposing their own lack of self-confidence. Christopher Robin reminded Pooh, you are braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, and smarter than you think. So my key point here, when you step into your power, you quit being a marionette to other people and external forces. You become the individualized and unique expression of your source creator. And I close with this great quote from Deepak Chopra, once you know who you really are, being is enough. You feel neither superior to anyone nor inferior to anyone. And you have no need for approval because you've awakened to your own infinite worth. Isn't that beautiful? I love that quote.
That is beautiful. And one of the lines that you said, I think, is probably the crux of so much of this. You said, when I let go of fitting in, and what is it about me that rises to the top? And I know for me, I had lived my life looking a certain way. I was corporate, I was professional, I was completely grounded. I had my veneer up so nobody else could get in. I had the whole package, right? And so for me to let go of fitting in, to really embrace where Spirit was leading me and letting that come through me and out into the world was an incredible shift for me. Took a lot of soul searching. So that particular line, when I let go of fitting in, really struck me.
I am so glad that you said that, because when I went through the identity shift, it was probably one of the hardest things that I've done in my life, to let go of that who I used to be and allow myself to become who I was supposed to be. And I discovered that I had built myself layer upon layer upon layer around this professional persona, which had worked for me 20 years earlier, but it wasn't me anymore. And I'm so glad you brought that up. So
right, and I like you. I think you and I have so much in common as far as who we were as professionals and now who we are as spiritual beings. But that period for me I call death of self, because I truly had to let my old self die so my new self could come to life.
Yes, that identity shift was extremely difficult for me. But one of the things in common, too, that we have in taking on both of their personas was that behind that mechanism behind both of us that's driving us, and some of the guests you had previously, is our desire to serve. We've just gone from serving in one capacity to serving in a different capacity.
Absolutely. Yep.
Absolutely. I'll talk a little bit about why I wrote this series and how I got here. I feel that self-esteem, energy, and spirituality are all part of the same energetic cycle. When you have great self-esteem, then you have a higher frequency in your energy pattern. When your frequency is high in your energy pattern, then you have a greater sense of connectedness and spirituality. When you have greater connectedness and spirituality, you have greater self-esteem, and on the cycle goes. So I love this program, and I hope it will help many, 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 many people, because my whole purpose of doing this work is to prevent other people from going through the suffering that I went through. And one of the things that you talked about in one of your, I don't know if you talked about it in the program or if it's in your first book, One Love, about soul contracts. And now that I've been through the process, I can see that this was a soul contract for me, that I was born with certain skills. I was born with supportive platforms that helped me get through, my dark ages so that I could learn the lessons I needed to learn and then step into this role that I carry now. And, my dark ages, what I refer to my dark ages, were pretty severe. It was a period of my life that lasted about 5 years. The energy in my life, as we were just talking about previously, it just wasn't working the way it should any longer. And the more I stayed attached to my old identity, the worse the energy, the energy got, until I went into a complete crash and burn. Of course, when I lost my job, I lost my identity. Soon after, I lost my relationship. I had a very lengthy illness that knocked me out for a long time. I went through a very difficult process with breast cancer. I mean, the process is never easy, but a number of twists and turns. And when I came out of the breast cancer process, I mean, you can't think of anything being worse than having cancer, but actually it was. I went into a period of several years of symptoms of PTSD. And, of course, all of this was frosted over with, some pretty, bring me to my knees depression. But I found myself in a very frightening situation where I was outside of the realm of known medical practices. And I had to literally let go of the rope and drop into a state of trust in myself at first, and then later in a higher presence, that I could pull myself out of this hole, because if I couldn't, I was going to spend the rest of my life on disability and welfare because I couldn't work. Yeah. So that's what brought me here. And then about 20 years ago, before I seriously got into this new identity, I started seeing energy fields. And what this did was to remind me constantly that we are beings of energy within an energetic environment, and that our thoughts and our attitudes can affect this energy, which ties a great deal in with your work. Do you have any comments on that?
Can you describe for the listeners, when you say you started seeing energy fields, what did that mean to you, so I understand it?
When I slightly shift the gaze of my eyes, soften my focus, I see the etheric field, that luminescent white field around people, around trees, around ridge lines, even around inanimate objects. On good days, I see colors around the auric field, but just having this pop into my life, and like you, coming from a background in public administration, I wasn't the most likely candidate to start seeing energy fields.
Exactly. Yep.
But like you, we both are in this, some kind of a soul contract, and it just reminded me it's hard to reset the paradigm of the way we think. But when you have that constant reminder, when you're actually seeing the energy field, it makes it more easily for you to really shift that paradigm and say, yes, I'm a being of energy. And we're all moving that way. It's been, you think of Christopher Columbus said that the world was round, but 2,000 years earlier, Pythagoras said the same thing. Einstein's theory of relativity came out 100 years ago, but we're still not thinking of ourselves in terms of energy. So I think if nothing else, if people can think of themselves in terms of energy, joy, and love, as we were saying, when you part that curtain of all the busyness around us and you look for some just really clear beacons that are there for you, it's not that complicated. It's very, very, very simple. It's just, basic qualities to tune in on. I did not have great self-esteem in the first place. I had come out of, I'd been raised in a sports environment where your self-worth was all placed around your athletic ability. I'd had issues of physical bullying when I was young. As I said, I'd wrapped my identity around my job. But one of the things that we need to have more of a conversation about in our society is mental health. I've been 6 years now without any symptoms, and it is a blessing. But when I look back at what my life looked like when I had depression issues and how that just drained away my self-worth because I was constantly second-guessing myself, our whole society needs to have a better conversation about mental health, and I will be focusing a lot more of my work on that. So just in sharing, my success, I just had that eureka moment of bulletproof self-esteem, and I know that it came in March of 2015 because I made a note of it and happened to come across it the other day. And when you experience the first time that sense of it's just like an explosion of expansion, you just kind of lose that ego that's been and come right to the soul. I was able to become genuine, and I found and exercised my voice, and people loved it. I said, oh, my goodness, why was I quiet all this time? And it was just, an astounding, validating moment. I really did feel like I'd been shot out of a canyon. And
so, Linda, can I ask you a clarifying question? So you were at the depths of the low. Was your coming back a gradual thing, or was it a boom thing? What happened there?
It was a gradual thing.
Okay.
A lot of it was reassurance that my health would improve, that I was, in fact, not going to die, which was very useful. And my guide said to me, as far as you are down, you will far exceed that when you come back up. And I tried to eliminate the trauma in my life. I'm an avid hiker, and I spend a lot of time outdoors. And my guide would say, stay the course, stay the course, stay the course. And one time I was told, lighten up. Don't be so hard on yourself, and have fun on this journey. I mean,
yeah,
it was
I've
just
gotten that same message.
It's a shift of consciousness, and that shift of consciousness, I don't know if it does happen for other people. It did not. It did not happen for me. It took a long time, and of course, we're never complete. It's something that we're always working on. But I will say that the more I raise my vibration, my frequency level, the more I raise my consciousness, the more my guides step up to the plate and match that and work more with me. And it goes back and forth all the time.
Yeah, can I? I'm just going to add a little segue to that, because what you just said is really profound. When we raise our consciousness and raise our levels of vibrational frequency, then our vibrational frequency is more godlike. The higher we can get, the more godlike. And then the more our guides and the archangels can connect to us. And in going with a conversation from Ward Barkhafer, who I spoke with in my last workshop, that's also when our loved ones from the other realm can connect with us too, because they are in such a higher level vibrational frequency. So really, hanging out in the lower vibrational frequencies doesn't do anybody any good, because all the good stuff is up when you're in the higher vibrational realm.
And that lower frequency is all something that is learned. We are born into a higher frequency, and we are all part of this universal field, which is a very high frequency. So the more we can keep in a high frequency ourselves, the more we're a big funnel for all of this information and all the bounty of the universe to come down to us. So thanks for bringing that up. It's how we maintain that frequency is really important, and that's why I think looking at these basic steps is really important, because we all start somewhere. We all started with that spark of recognition that said aha, and brought us into higher and higher and higher states of thinking, and that there are other things that bring us down, and one is not being genuine. I think that we pretzel ourselves into, wanting everyone to like us. And when you stand in your authenticity, you have so much more freedom, and you create expansiveness around that. When you're disingenuous, your energy wavers. When you're being genuine, you're really firmly planted. And I think that one of the things that you learn when you really start to, be sterling, really start to be authentic with yourself, is that when you're not yourself, you're not going to please everybody. And when you are yourself, you're still not going to please everybody. But at least you're going to be
right. Exactly right.
I know. I do think it's something that we're more comfortable with, as we mature. There's a great clarity there too when you're completely being yourself. It opens up your energy. My guide showed me myself being in like this glowing grace, when I'm anchored in myself. But when I wasn't being genuine, I looked like a Picasso painting. I was all, my eyes and ears were in the wrong places. I was, in contortions. And visually,
right.
That's what your energy would look like when you're not being yourself, when you're being pulled in kind, all different kinds of directions. And I'll go back.
Yeah,
to
Linda, can I add one thing onto that?
Uh-huh.
When I agree completely with what you're saying, and I love your description of the Picasso painting. That yes, as an energy, we're just whacked when we're not in alignment with ourselves. And one of the most important things that I've seen in that, in being able to stay true to who you genuinely are, is to find community of like-minded folks who are standing in their genuineness as well. Because when they're doing that, it gives you the freedom to be completely in your genuineness. So it's really hard to make this a one-person solo activity. It helps so much to have community to stand in that authenticity.
Well, again, echoing, it's not a one-person solo activity. I'll bring in here. I had a counselor who was extremely helpful in my going through this identity process and coming out of my dark ages. And she repeatedly said to me, Linda, you have to find your tribe.
Yep.
And
yep.
I didn't realize how important and how profound finding your tribe is until I did find my tribe. And once I found my tribe and started working with people of like thinking, then there was a flow to it, and it reinforced who I am. It constantly reinforced that I was on the right path. But even more important than that, when I started receiving validation from my tribe around my work, that was truly explosive. It said, yes, you are truly on the right path. When someone in your tribe, when one of your peers says to you, this is good work, you should do more of it, it's like when you praise a child and you see them beam back at you. And it's just, reinforcing not only yourself, and I think a really important part of being yourself is continuing that energetic cycle and allowing other people to be themselves. Not only do we want to be free, but take a look at the way you interact with other people. And number one, how are you supporting them in being their true selves? And then number two, how are you encouraging them, to move forward with their work or whatever? It's almost the same concept as tithing. The more you put out, the more will come back to you.
Yes, beautifully said. So can you talk a little bit about disease? and
disease,
how that relates to our energetic flow or lack thereof.
Well, if you're trying to be who you aren't, that will never work, because you will be shutting off that energetic flow. You'll be trying to, that energetic flow that is uniquely you is flowing and replenishing you all the time. And when you try to be someone else, then you're, I compare it to a mountain stream. Instead of, flowing freely, you just keep putting stones in the way, and they just keep having to flow around the edges, and it just disrupts the flow. If you aren't yourself, eventually you will make yourself sick physically or emotionally, because you'll shut off that flow. You'll create an energetic imbalance. You may say, well, I'm really going to try to be more of this, and this to satisfy my partner. But when you do, you're just bringing more imbalance into your life. You start to throw everything off kilter, as though you were stacking blocks. Eventually, you're going to stack too many blocks on one side, and the whole thing is going to topple.
That's a good visual. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want to topple your blocks.
No, I don't.
I also think that when we are ourselves, of course we're more relaxed, because we are maintaining that flow. So you can both express and absorb, and express and absorb. This goes back to what we were saying at the beginning about the experiential and the intellectual, or the allowing as opposed to the striving. You express and you absorb. And it's also part of that express and absorb, too, is what you were saying earlier of, letting go of the energy that's no longer serving you. It may not be negative energy. It's just energy that's no longer serving you. It might be a belief or a thought. It's what I call, breathing the vitality of life. If you were just completely open and were sitting on a mountaintop and had no thought in your mind whatsoever, and just inhaling and exhaling just the pure mountain air, and just breathe that vitality of life, and how that would expand you and feed you. You like that visual? You like mountains?
I'm doing it while you're talking about it. Actually, I'm just meditating here while you're talking. I sort of put myself on the mountaintop, and I was just inhaling and exhaling just not reality, but just even potentiality, and just seeing what was coming to me while you were talking. So thank you. I love that.
And I love that word, potentiality. I use the P's, the possibility and potentiality, possibilities and potential, because it's often, you look at creativity and how that stimulates our life. It's almost like you reach up into the sky and you grab, like a little luminescent dot, and you pull it down and expand on that. That's how it's creativity. And that's all, potentiality and possibility. And that's what keeps us learning and growing. And I'm really glad you mentioned that. I'm going to talk about another piece of energy here, and I think you're going to like this one. I was trying to make an extremely difficult decision one time, and my guide introduced me to a concept called bandwidth. Now, we all have Wi-Fi. We all know what bandwidth is. Bandwidth is a collection of frequencies that, run within a certain bandwidth. So we're talking about energy here. We all have a bandwidth. So visualize this energetic bandwidth going vertically up and down through your body, and then it has all your different frequencies running inside of it. This bandwidth is who you are, and it is your comfort zone. And so imagine that your bandwidth is stationary, and you stand to one side of it, or you stand to the other side of it, and all of a sudden you stand outside of your bandwidth, and you start to feel a rub. You start to feel uncomfortable. You just start to feel that you're in an energy that's not yours. You're not being yourself. You're not in the flow of your appropriate energy. This visual that my guide sent me was very clear about standing in your bandwidth. Now, your bandwidth is going to change as your consciousness changes and you learn and you grow. But the importance is to be in your bandwidth, not in someone else's. Have you ever thought along those lines of being in your energy, in your own flow?
Yes, I have. And you actually, in prior conversation, had given me a couple of good little tools, such as if I'm typically when I'm writing something, because I can be writing and I'm in the flow, and all of a sudden I'll hit like a bump, or I'll write a couple words and it just hits me kind of like a thud. In your words, is it a thud or is it a ping? And when it's a ping, like everything's flowing beautifully, that's great. When it's a thud, it's like stop and rethink what you're communicating here. Either pick different words or, really look at the concept. So your ping and thud is kind of how I determine whether I'm still within my bandwidth or not.
I love that. That was taught to me years ago, and it goes back to this, this repeating theme we keep coming back into, is that when we're over-striving, sometimes we just get this, I'm going to get this done attitude, and we're going to grit our way through it, and we forget to tune in and say, is this a ping or is this a thud? And if we take that time to tune in and allow the energy to flow to us. I mean, our guides and our higher intellectual functioning is always going to function better if we tune into a higher frequency. Are we tuned in, or are we down there with a shovel and digging the trench and saying, by God, I'm going to get this done. I'm going to get it done in the next hour. as opposed to tuning in and saying, okay, well, how does this really feel to me? Because when you open up, because I can be so guilty of that. Oh, I need to finish writing this piece because there's something else I really want to move on to, and then I'll go back and read the piece and say, oh my gosh, that's adequate. I don't want adequate in my life. I want extraordinary, and I have to remind myself, oh, good gracious, stop, slow down. And, wait until something pings for you. That brings up another point, too, and that is wait for it. Sometimes we'll be putting some – I hear you going, Sometimes I'll put something together and say, that's pretty good. That's okay. That's all right. But it doesn't quite go ping, and I'll be out – I'll read something. I'll be out hiking. I will – have a casual conversation with someone. I'll see a headline on a newspaper, and all of a sudden it'll be bingo. It'll be up, and that perfect thought that's going to complement what you were writing or what you were putting together will come to you. Does that happen to you also?
All the time.
When you wait for it?
Yes. I will get information from Spirit, and I'll write it down. And it just kind of floats out there. It's like it's not really grounded. I don't know what I'm going to use it for. And then sometimes like 3 weeks, a month, sometimes 3 months later, I get the end of the story. And as soon as I get the end of the story, all of a sudden it all flows together. It's grounded, and I know exactly what I'm going to do with it.
That's a really good point. And I know we're getting way off topic here, but when something has come to completion. And I think along with the ping thud, we can accept something, say, yeah, that's pretty good, but the energy hasn't quite come to completion yet. And when you find that perfect thing, knowing that the energy has come to completion is that way of sending that word out into the universe. If it hasn't quite come to completion, it's not going to get out into the energy. It's not going to get out into the universe as much. So. Yep. Along with your ping thud, go ahead. Yes, finishing your sentence for you.
Along with checking in with your ping and your thud, you had said something else that I thought was brilliant. When you talk about joy a lot. I don't. Joy to me is like a fleeting concept, and I think I'm learning about it. But you talk about joy a lot. And one of the things that I thought was brilliant was when you and I were talking earlier off air about joy serving as your compass. Can you talk about that a little bit?
I am really big on joy because it's new to me. It's like having, a new favorite dress to wear or something. It's something that I just put it on and it felt perfect. I come from a very strong background of Puritan work ethic. If you work really, really, really hard, you'll have enough in your life. And the biggest compliment you could pay to someone would be to say that they're a hard worker. And joy did not factor in there. Nobody said, we will consider you to be an extreme success by the amount of joy you feel. None of us were raised that way. We were raised to be obedient. We were raised to have spiritual principles of gratitude and compassion. We were raised to fit into society. We were raised to be contributing members of society. We were raised to be, good parents and to be responsible. But nobody ever taught us that when you were really successful, you were a person who lives in joy. And
no, that was never a concept ever.
It's the way, what do you call it, spirit or God or your higher presence or whatever, we were put on this earth to live in joy. We come into this lifetime, this lifetime, I'll get into a little bit of, what my guide told me about this lifetime being like paper dolls, that it's fun and it's pretty. So, we're here to live in joy, and we're here so that spirit can express through us. And spirit didn't want to express through us by, nose to the grindstone. Spirit wants to express through us in creativity and joy and love. So that's my foundation that I try to constantly remind myself and starting with the power of love, but backing it up with just living in joy. And how well we nurture ourselves is such an important part of that. And knowing who you are is how you know how to nurture yourself. When you're being genuine, coming back to, this is who I am, and I know that I feed myself by having a couple of hours of quiet time and reading a book, or I feed someone else might feed themselves by going out and being wildly exuberant in a busy restaurant or in groups of people. If we know ourselves, then we know how to nurture ourselves. Another piece here I wanted to make sure we had time for, and that is when we aren't ourselves, we get into what I call suppression of the psyche. And I told you earlier that I want to focus a lot of my work on mental health, on having healthy emotional health. And I think that this process of not being yourself, of running with the crowd versus being authentic, this what I call suppression of the psyche, is one of the number one causes of depression and anxiety problems. I think if we go back to what you and I were talking about earlier, about that consistent flow of energy going through us, then we're always going to be healthy. And of course, in my world, what happens in your body happens first in your mind. And if we keep that healthy energy going and keep our minds healthy, that's extremely important. I can hear you saying something there.
I'm just listening and agreeing with you.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. When you're genuine, your life is a soft expression. It doesn't have the rough edges to it. It's when you're when you're not yourself, or when you're trying to travel too many roads. That could be a big part of not being yourself. I mean, you have. Multitasking was the buzzword of the 90s, now people are saying, well, both multitasking isn't such a great thing after all. And many people will try to travel too many divergent roads, and their attention span is so split that, again, they're not getting into this, nice flow of genuine energy. It's a good thing I don't work in human resources, huh?
I used to. I was a director of human resources for 10 years, so, yep, I get it.
Oh, dear. Well, I worked for an EAP program in the counseling service, and again, one of the biggest things that we dealt with was work-life balance, and getting back to our balancing again of being the intellectual and experiential. When you're not being authentic, there's just little room for that. There's very little room for that personal growth, and your time is all expended, maintaining that persona, or you're traveling down, so many different roads that you're not putting any focus into the road where you should be. I understand that we all have to put on, we all wear different hats, and we all, have to go in different directions, but we need to balance that and make sure that we come back and come into our core and what makes us stable. We create our own mold. We don't fill the mold that someone else created for you, either your family or your relationship. Sue Morter has a great point that she makes all the time that says, row your boat. Don't row somebody else's boat. Row your boat. Create your own mold. My guide said to me, hold out your basket and let the universe fill it. And when you're being yourself, you can hold out that basket and say, okay, I'm here. I am here. And the universe will pour some of that bounty into your basket. We've covered a lot today. I've got some more notes.
Linda, can we
Go ahead.
talk? Yeah, can we talk for a minute about nature versus nurture and how that might lead us into who we are going to become as adults in this whole overarching view of becoming your integral self?
Well, I have a theory on that, but why don't you go ahead first?
Well, so nature versus nurture, what I think is intriguing, I have 2 adopted daughters, and when I see them as spiritual beings, I understand why they ended up in my home, because their life purpose and life goal is to really know themselves as spiritual beings, which may not have happened had they remained in China. So I believe that way back when, before they were born, it was determined that they were going to end up in my home for that spiritual piece, even though they bring with them what their parents gave them through DNA. So I just think it's kind of an interesting concept of what we bring into the world, who we end up with in becoming who we're then supposed to become in the long run.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of this goes back to what you teach about soul contract, and how we are born into. It comes down to what we come into this. I'm thinking ahead of myself. We come into this lifetime to learn certain lessons, and we come into this lifetime also with a purpose. And I believe that our soul contract brings us into this lifetime both with the skills and qualities to fall into that lesson in our lifetime, and to step into what our purpose is. Similarly, I was born into a fabulous family, and when I went through the dark ages, I would really have my doubts as to whether or not I would have survived if I hadn't had that family to support me when the bottom, literally fell out of my life. So again, I think your daughters were born into this circumstance because you're going to nurture what that purpose is for them in this life. And I think I was born into the family that I was born into, so I would have that support when I went through a very difficult learning process. It was a spiritual learning, what I call spiritual tough love. But we and as we try to satisfy this role in our lifetime, I think nature is an important role. I'm not sure how much emphasis I put on nurture, but go ahead.
Well, I just think that they're both equally important, because if my daughters really only had that which the DNA provided for them, without my nurture piece, which is probably completely different than their DNA was outlined for them, I don't know that they would meet the soul level that they had intended in the first place.
And we all have experiences that enhance. I think we're continuously being fed into that life lesson, life purpose process. I think all part of that energetic loop also.
So talking about the nature and nurture, as a child, Linda, did you see aspects, did you have experiences or aspects or passions that you've then seen develop into being who you are now as this energetic being?
When I was young, like you, I was raised in a very conservative Protestant church, and we were regular churchgoers and active members of the church. And there were times when we visited a different church with my grandparents, and there was something different about this church that I would suddenly become overwhelmed somehow. In a way that I couldn't describe as a young child, except that I felt sick to my stomach. And quite often, my grandfather lived very near the church. Quite often, I was sent home early while the others stayed in church because I said I had a tummy ache. But as a young child, there was something going on for me there. Did you, when you were young, did you have similar experiences?
I was the avid churchgoer when I was young. It was my second home. My mom was working full-time, which in the 60s, when the 60s was unusual. So my home was across the street from our church. So instead of going home to be a latchkey child by myself, I would go to the church. And my first job was cleaning up the sanctuary after church service to prepare it for the next week. That was my first paying job, 10 cents every Wednesday. Thank you very much. So it's interesting to see how that those seeds that were planted as a child have come into my being the spiritual being that I am.
So we were raised in a spiritual platform, but that platform changed for us as we matured and as we started making our own conscious choices and our consciousness changed.
Yes, for me it did. I mean, there's certainly the same thread going through it of loving God, feeling a personal connection to Christ and to God. That certainly has stayed steady throughout my life, but I think some of the other constructs attached to that have shifted and changed over time.
And I'm glad that that's the case because because of my background, I like having the ability to use higher power, universal force, spirit, God, somewhat interchangeably. 15 years ago, using the word God had somehow come out of vogue is a poor way to say it. And it's nice for us all to see that as an energy and as a consciousness. Thank you. I love that.
Yes. So, Linda,
Okay.
we just have, we've got 5 minutes left. So, question, do you have any questions that you want the listeners to think about?
Well, I have a couple of suggestions, and again, I'm going to echo what I call the Soul Sisters. I call the Soul Sisters chant. If you look at these things, and if you do the work and actually needle your way into them, there's a lot to learn. First, think about how you've grown, both personally and professionally, and what interests or skills have contributed to this growth. Look back at what your skills were, as we've been talking about, and how they've been steps for you along the way. The other, we're going back to our conversation about paying FUD, is to notice how light you feel and how life has a gentler and energetic flow when you're being yourself. Not only when you're being yourself, but when you're being yourself, when you can consider yourself on equal footing with everybody around you, not feel less than or more than anyone. We're not here to compare ourselves to one another. And then this focus exercise, just sit down and list 3 of your key skills: communication, technology, people skills, whatever they might be. List 3 of your key personal qualities. These are different from skills. You might be nurturing, you might be humorous, you might be intelligent. And then identify 3 interests that you have or that you would like to pursue, maybe music, art, sports, gardening. I'd like to learn more about weather. Just pick a new interest that would open you up. Anything that expands you and, as they say, broadens your horizon is going to raise your frequency. And you may see, like me, you may see changes being incredibly subtle, but if I look back at who I was, even a few years ago, and I just see this steady escalation, it's extremely motivating, very satisfying work, and just go out there and blossom. Pick your pieces of creativity out of the sky. Thanks, Ruth.
Okay, perfect. Yes, absolutely. And I really want to thank you, Linda, for joining us tonight. And folks, if you would like to check out her website, please go to spinstrawtogoldnow.com. So thanks for listening in. It is a pleasure to have you all with us. It's truly an honor to be among the hosts of International Angels Network. I look forward to walking with Spirit and you next Thursday, June 14, 2018. God bless.